The thundering hooves of the runaway stallion drowned out Garrett Voss's desperate shouts as he watched his prized mustang, Diablo, bolt toward the canyon edge. Blood streamed from a deep gash on the animal's flank, staining the dusty Arizona terrain crimson under the merciless August sun of 1878. Garrett pushed his worn boots into his remaining horse's sides, urging the exhausted mare forward as panic gripped his chest. Diablo was more than just his livelihood. That horse was the only thing he truly cared about in this God-forsaken territory. Whoa, Diablo, whoa. Garrett's voice cracked as he watched the injured stallion stumble, its powerful legs finally giving out mere yards from the treacherous drop. Diablo collapsed in a cloud of dust, sides heaving, eyes wild with pain and fear. Garrett leapt from his mare before she had fully stopped, boots hitting the ground hard as he rushed to the fallen stallion. His calloused hands trembled as he examined the wound deeper than he'd first thought, the result of an encounter with a territorial bull that had charged through his makeshift camp at dawn. "Damn it all," he muttered, removing his bandana to press against the wound. The blood soaked through almost instantly. This was beyond his abilities. Diablo needed a veterinarian, but the nearest town was half a day's ride and the stallion couldn't travel. A movement caught Garrett's eye, dust rising on the horizon. Riders approaching. He reached instinctively for the Colt revolver at his hip, squinting against the harsh sunlight. Living alone in these parts for 5 years had taught him caution. Trust came at too high a price. As the riders drew closer, Garrett could make out a small wagon with 2 figures. The driver appeared to be an older man, and beside him sat a woman in a simple blue dress, her hair covered by a bonnet. Settlers, perhaps, or travelers headed west, not bandits at least. "You need help there, mister," the man called out as they approached. He was graying at the temples, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the western sun. Garrett hesitated, still keeping one hand near his revolver. "My horse, gored by a bull this morning, wounds deep." The wagon came to a stop several yards away. The woman was already climbing down before the older man could help her, gathering her skirts as she moved swiftly toward Garrett and the injured horse. "Katherine, wait," the older man cautioned, but she paid him no mind. Katherine Edwards approached with purpose, her blue eyes surveying the situation with a calm that surprised Garrett. She couldn't have been more than 25, but there was nothing timid in her demeanor as she knelt beside the injured stallion, seemingly unconcerned with the dust dirtying her dress. "That's a bad wound," she said, her voice steady. "May I?" She gestured toward the bloodied bandana. Garrett nodded, watching with wary eyes as she gently lifted the makeshift bandage to examine Diablo's injury. The stallion whinnied in pain but didn't struggle against her touch. "My father and I are headed to Tucson. I have some medical supplies." "I've treated horses before," she explained, looking up at Garrett. Her eyes were direct, unflinching. "What's your name?" "Garrett. Garrett Voss. I'm Katherine Edwards. That's my father, Joseph." She glanced back at the wagon. "Pa, bring my medicine bag, please." As the older man rummaged through their supplies, Katherine placed a gentle hand on Diablo's neck, stroking him softly. To Garrett's surprise, the stallion seemed to calm under her touch. "He's a beautiful animal," she said. "What's his name, Diablo?" Garrett shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I appreciate the offer, but Mr. Voss," she interrupted, "your horse has lost a lot of blood. That wound needs cleaning and stitching, or he won't make it to sundown. Do you have a better option?" Her directness silenced him. He shook his head. Joseph Edwards approached with a worn leather bag, handing it to his daughter. Katherine opened it, revealing an assortment of vials, bandages, and medical tools that seemed too professional for an ordinary settler. "Were you a nurse in the war?" Garrett asked, curiosity overcoming his usual reticence. Katherine smiled slightly as she removed a bottle of clear liquid. "No, my mother was a midwife and healer back in Boston. She taught me everything she knew before she passed. I've been caring for people and animals since I was 12. She soaked a clean cloth with the liquid. This will sting him, but it needs to be done. Can you hold his head steady? Garrett moved to Diablo's head, stroking the horse's muzzle and whispering calming words. When Katherine applied the solution to the wound, the stallion jerked and whinnied in pain. "Easy, boy," Garrett murmured. "Easy." As Katherine worked, cleaning the wound with practiced movements, Joseph set about building a small fire nearby. "We'll need hot water to clean those instruments," he explained when Garrett glanced his way. Katherine reached into her bag and withdrew a needle and thread. "This needs stitching. It'll take some time." "Do what you need to do," Garrett replied, still holding Diablo steady. Katherine paused, her expression shifting to something more solemn. "Before I begin, I'd like to pray over him if you don't mind." Garrett stiffened. "Prayer won't close his wound." "No, but it can't hurt either," she replied calmly. "I've found it brings comfort if nothing else." Before he could object further, Katherine bowed her head, placed one hand gently on Diablo's neck and closed her eyes. "Lord, guide my hands as I tend to this creature of yours. Ease his suffering and grant him strength to heal. Amen." The simple prayer lasted only seconds, but it stirred something uncomfortable in Garrett's chest, a memory of his mother's prayers long ago, before disease had taken her and left him alone with a father whose only faith was in whiskey and fists. Katherine looked up, meeting his eyes briefly before turning her attention to preparing the needle. "Hold him steady now." For the next hour, Katherine worked meticulously, stitching the wound with careful precision. Diablo flinched and trembled but remained surprisingly docile under her care. Garrett watched her hands, capable and sure, moving with confidence born of experience. "You've done this before," he observed. "Many times," she replied without looking up. "Animals are often more honest patients than people. They don't hide their pain and they know when you're trying to help." As she worked, Joseph approached with a canteen of water, offering it to Garrett. He accepted with a nod of thanks, suddenly aware of his parched throat. "Where you headed, Mr. Voss?" Joseph asked. "Nowhere in particular," Garrett replied. "I move with the seasons. Broke horses for the army for a while, but I prefer my own company now." Joseph nodded, understanding in his eyes. "War changes a man. I served myself back in '46 against Mexico." Garrett didn't correct the assumption. It wasn't the war that had driven him to solitude, though he'd seen his share of violence with the 7th Cavalry before deserting. It was what came before and after. "There," Katherine said finally, tying off the last stitch. "That should hold, but he'll need rest. No riding him for at least 2 weeks, preferably longer." She began cleaning her instruments methodically. "The wound will need cleaning daily to prevent infection." Garrett looked at the neat row of stitches. "You've done good work. I'm obliged to you. You have a camp nearby?" Joseph asked, glancing at the sun lowering toward the horizon, about a mile back near the creek. Katherine exchanged a look with her father before addressing Garrett again. "We should stay the night. I'll need to check on him in the morning, change the bandage." Garrett hesitated. He wasn't accustomed to company, hadn't shared his campfire with anyone in over a year. But Diablo needed care, and these people had gone out of their way to help. "You're welcome to share my camp," he said finally. "It's not much, but there's water and shelter enough." With careful movements, they helped Diablo to his feet. The stallion was weak, but able to walk slowly. Garrett led him while Joseph drove the wagon, Katherine riding alongside on Garrett's mare. The camp was simple, a lean-to shelter built against a rock face, a small fire pit, and a stream running nearby. While Joseph unhitched their horses, Katherine immediately set about checking on Diablo again, applying a poultice to the bandaged wound. "This will help draw out any infection," she explained. "It's a mixture my mother taught me, yarrow, comfrey, and a few other herbs." Garrett nodded, watching as she worked. "Your father said you're headed to Tucson?" "Yes, we have family there, my mother's sister. After my mother passed last winter, there wasn't much keeping us in Boston." A shadow crossed her face. "The church? Well, they weren't kind about certain things." Curiosity piqued. Garrett wanted to ask more, but years of minding his own business held his tongue. Instead, he set about building up the fire as the evening chill began to settle into the canyon. Joseph returned, carrying supplies from their wagon. Katherine tells me your horse should recover with proper care. Thanks to her skills, Garrett acknowledged. You're welcome to whatever food I have. It's just beans and coffee, I'm afraid. We have salt pork and some corn bread, Katherine offered. We could share a proper meal. The three of them worked in companionable silence, preparing dinner as the sun disappeared behind the canyon walls. Garrett found himself stealing glances at Katherine, the way the firelight played on her features, the gentle confidence in her movements. It had been a long time since he'd shared space with a woman, longer still since he'd found one intriguing. Over the simple meal, Joseph spoke of their journey from Boston, the hardships they'd faced crossing the plains, and their hopes for a new beginning in Tucson. Katherine's aunt runs an apothecary there, Joseph explained. Needs help since her husband passed. Katherine has the knowledge for it: herbs, remedies, care for the sick. She's gifted that way. Katherine looked uncomfortable with the praise. It's just learning, Pa. Mother was the gifted one. Your mother would be proud of how you tended that horse today, Joseph insisted. She always said you had healing hands. Garrett noticed a tension in Katherine at the mention of her mother, something unspoken hanging in the air between father and daughter. He recognized the look he'd seen it in his own reflection often enough, the weight of grief mixed with something else. As the night deepened, Joseph excused himself to sleep in their wagon, leaving Garrett and Katherine by the fire. For a while they sat in silence, the crackling flames and distant coyote calls the only sounds. You don't believe in prayer, Katherine said suddenly, not as an accusation but as an observation. Garrett poked at the fire with a stick. No, can't say that I do. May I ask why? He considered deflecting the question but found himself answering honestly. I've seen too much that tells me otherwise. If there is a God, he's not concerned with the likes of me or anyone else down here. Katherine studied him across the flames. You were a soldier. It wasn't a question. Garrett nodded slowly. 7th Cavalry. Saw things no God worth believing in would allow, including at the Little Bighorn, she asked softly. Garrett's head snapped up, surprise evident in his expression. How did you, the way you carry yourself? The look in your eyes when Pa mentioned the army, Katherine's gaze was steady. And you have a scar on your left hand that looks like it came from that time. Garrett looked down at the jagged scar that ran from his thumb across his palm, a parting gift from a Lakota warrior's knife, before he'd managed to escape the slaughter that had claimed Custer, and most of his men 2 years prior. I deserted before that day, he admitted, surprising himself with the confession. But I was there when it happened. I'd gone back to warn a friend. He hadn't spoken of this to anyone. Didn't make it in time. Katherine didn't offer platitudes or judgments, just a quiet nod of understanding. War asks terrible things of men. It wasn't just the war, Garrett found himself continuing. My father was a believer, carried his Bible everywhere, quoted scripture while he beat my mother, prayed for forgiveness afterward. When she took ill, he said it was God's punishment for her wickedness. His voice hardened. She prayed until the end, didn't save her. Katherine's eyes reflected the firelight, sympathy in their depths. I'm sorry, that's not faith, that's cruelty wearing faith's clothes. Maybe so, but I've seen enough to know that prayers go unanswered more often than not. Yet you let me pray over your horse today, she observed. Garrett managed a small smile. Diablo needed all the help he could get, and it seemed to matter to you. They fell silent again, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. Eventually, Katherine stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. I should check on Diablo once more before turning in, she said. Garrett rose as well. I'll come with you. They walked together to where the stallion rested, Katherine's lantern casting long shadows. The horse nickered softly as they approached. Katherine checked the bandages, nodding with satisfaction. He's doing well, no fever, which is a good sign. She stroked Diablo's neck. He's strong, a fighter. Like his owner, she added, glancing at Garrett. Their eyes met in the lantern light, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding that went beyond words. Garrett felt a stirring in his chest, unfamiliar after years of emotional solitude. "Thank you," he said simply, "for saving him." "You're welcome, Mr. Voss." "Garrett," he corrected. "Just Garrett," she smiled, and the sight of it warmed something long cold within him. "Good night, Garrett. Good night, Katherine." As she walked away toward the wagon, Garrett remained beside Diablo, his mind unexpectedly full of thoughts he hadn't entertained in years of companionship, of the gentle touch of a woman's hand, of possibilities he'd long since abandoned. Morning came with golden light flooding the canyon, revealing a landscape transformed by dawn. Garrett woke to the smell of coffee brewing and the soft murmur of voices. Katherine was already tending to Diablo, changing his bandages while speaking quietly to Joseph. Garrett approached, running a hand through his hair in a futile attempt to tame it. "How is he this morning?" Katherine looked up with a smile. "Better than I expected. The wound is clean, no signs of infection." She straightened, wiping her hands on a cloth. "He's strong, but he still needs rest and care." "Thanks to you," Garrett acknowledged, accepting the cup of coffee Joseph offered. Over a breakfast of leftover corn bread, Joseph announced their plans. "We should reach Tucson by tomorrow evening if we make good time today." Garrett felt an unexpected pang at the thought of their departure. "That soon?" Katherine looked up, something unreadable in her expression. "We've imposed on your hospitality long enough." "It's not an imposition," Garrett found himself saying, "and Diablo, he might need more care." "I can show you how to change the bandages, what signs of infection to watch for," Katherine offered, though she seemed hesitant. Joseph cleared his throat. "Actually, I've been thinking." He looked between Garrett and his daughter. "Tucson's not going anywhere. That horse needs proper care for at least a few days. Perhaps we could stay a bit longer if Mr. Voss doesn't mind." Garrett tried to hide his relief. "I'd welcome the company." The decision made, they settled into a rhythm over the next few days. Joseph proved to be skilled at hunting, bringing back rabbits for their meals. Katherine tended to Diablo daily, the stallion improving visibly under her care. Garrett found himself opening up more than he had in years, sharing stories of his travels across the Western Territories. On the third evening, as they sat around the fire, Joseph announced he would try his luck at catching fish in the deeper pools downstream, leaving Garrett and Katherine alone once again. "Your father is a good man," Garrett observed after Joseph had departed. Katherine nodded, her eyes on the flames. "The best I've known. After my mother died, he gave up everything to bring me west. His position at the bank, his home, his standing in the community." She looked up at Garrett. "All because they turned against me." "Against you? Why would they do that?" Katherine was silent for a long moment, as if weighing whether to trust him with her story. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I was engaged to be married in Boston, the son of a prominent church elder. It seemed a good match. I would have security, a place in society." Her hands twisted in her lap. "Then a young woman came to my mother, desperate. She was with child by my fiancé." Garrett's expression darkened. "I see." "My mother helped her, gave her medicine to ease her suffering as she miscarried. When the girl's father found out, he accused us of performing abortions." Katherine's voice remained steady, though her eyes reflected old pain. "My fiancé denied everything, claimed the girl was lying. The church believed him." "But you didn't," Garrett guessed. "No. I confronted him and he admitted it, said it didn't matter, that we could still marry, that no one would believe a hysterical woman over him." Her jaw tightened at the memory. "I broke the engagement publicly, told everyone the truth. After that, doors closed to us. My mother's practice suffered. Then when she fell ill." Katherine's voice finally faltered. "They wouldn't help her," Garrett finished, understanding dawning. "The doctor in town refused to see her, said God was punishing her for her sins." Katherine looked up, meeting Garrett's gaze with unexpected fierceness. "That's not the God I believe in, Garrett. My God doesn't punish the innocent or reward the wicked. My God is in the healing touch, in compassion, in justice." Her words hung in the air between them, challenging, passionate. Garrett found himself moved by her conviction, even if he couldn't share it. "You're a remarkable woman, Katherine Edwards," he said finally. A hint of color touched her cheeks. "I'm just someone trying to do what's right. That's rarer than you might think." Their conversation was interrupted by Joseph's return, proudly displaying 3 trout for their dinner. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, a deepening of understanding, of respect. The next morning, Garrett woke early to find Katherine already at the stream, washing linens. The dawn light played across her features as she worked, her sleeves rolled up to reveal slender forearms. She looked up as he approached, a smile warming her face. "Good morning," she greeted him. "I hope I didn't wake you." "No, I'm used to early hours." He crouched beside her, offering to help. Their hands brushed as she passed him a wet cloth to wring out, and the brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through him. "Your father mentioned you broke horses for the army," she said as they worked. "Is that how you came by Diablo?" Garrett nodded. "In a way." "He was army property deemed unbreakable. They were going to shoot him. I convinced my commanding officer to let me have him instead." "And you tamed him?" Garrett smiled at the memory. "Not at first. He threw me more times than I can count, nearly killed me twice. But we came to an understanding eventually." "What changed?" "I stopped trying to break him and started trying to understand him instead." Garrett looked toward where Diablo grazed peacefully nearby. He'd been mistreated before the army got him, beaten, starved. He didn't trust humans. "Can't say I blamed him." Katherine studied Garrett's profile. "Sometimes the most wounded souls make the most loyal companions once they learn to trust again." Her words carried a weight that suggested she wasn't just talking about the horse. Garrett met her gaze, struck by the insight in her blue eyes. "Maybe so," he agreed quietly. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Mornings were spent tending to Diablo and the other horses. Afternoons, Garrett would show Katherine and Joseph the surrounding countryside, revealing hidden springs and spectacular vistas that few ever witnessed. In the evenings, they shared meals and stories around the campfire. A week after their arrival, Garrett took Katherine to a high ridge overlooking the canyon. The sunset painted the rock formations in brilliant golds and reds, the vastness of the Arizona territory spreading before them like an artist's canvas. "It's breathtaking," Katherine said, her voice hushed with awe. "This is why I stay out here," Garrett admitted. "Cities feel like prison cells after you've known this kind of freedom." Katherine turned to him, studying his face in the fading light. "Is that the only reason? Or are you hiding from something?" The directness of her question caught him off guard, but he found himself answering honestly. "Maybe both. After the war, after what happened at Little Bighorn, I couldn't face civilization anymore. The lies people tell themselves about honor and progress, while they slaughter anyone who stands in their way." "Not everyone believes those lies," Katherine said softly. "No, I'm beginning to see that." Their eyes held for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Garrett found himself wanting to reach for her hand but hesitated, uncertain of his welcome. Katherine broke the silence. "We should head back. Pa will be wondering where we've gone." The walk back to camp was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, however, they found Joseph packing their wagon, his expression troubled. "Pa, what's happening?" Katherine hurried forward. Joseph handed her a folded piece of paper. "Ryder came through while you were gone, brought this telegram from your aunt. Your cousin Sarah is ill childbed fever after her baby came early. Your aunt needs you in Tucson as soon as possible." Katherine's face paled as she read the message. "We have to leave at first light," she said, looking up at Garrett with regret in her eyes. "Of course," he agreed, ignoring the hollow feeling in his chest. "Family comes first." The evening passed in subdued preparation. Katherine checked Diablo one last time, giving Garrett detailed instructions for his continued care. "The stitches can come out in another week. Be gentle when you remove them." Garrett nodded, memorizing her every word, aware that these might be their last hours together. "I'll remember." When morning came, the wagon was packed and ready before the sun had fully risen. Joseph shook Garrett's hand firmly. "You've been a generous host, Mr. Voss. Perhaps our paths will cross again in Tucson someday." "Perhaps," Garrett agreed, though he had no plans to visit any city. Katherine approached last, her expression composed though her eyes betrayed her emotions. "Diablo will be fine now," she said. "You've been a good student. I had an excellent teacher." Garrett hesitated, then reached for her hand, holding it gently between his own. "Katherine, I know," she said softly. "Me too." They stood there, neither willing to be the first to let go, until Joseph called that they needed to start if they hoped to reach Tucson by nightfall. Katherine reluctantly pulled her hand away. "Goodbye, Garrett Voss. Goodbye, Katherine Edwards." He watched as the wagon rolled away, Katherine's figure growing smaller in the distance. Only when they had disappeared beyond the bend did he turn back to his empty camp, the silence deafening after days of companionship. Diablo nickered softly as Garrett approached, nudging his shoulder with his muzzle. "It's just us again, old friend," Garrett murmured, stroking the horse's neck. "Like it's always been." But as he went through the motions of breaking camp, they'd stayed too long in one place anyway. Garrett found himself pausing, looking toward the horizon where Katherine had disappeared. For the first time in years, solitude felt like a burden rather than a refuge. 3 weeks passed. Diablo healed completely, the scar on his flank the only evidence of his injury. Garrett removed the stitches carefully, just as Katherine had instructed, and the stallion returned to his former strength. They traveled northward, putting distance between themselves and the memories that haunted the canyon. Yet Garrett found he couldn't outride his thoughts of Katherine, her steady hands, her unwavering convictions, the compassion in her eyes. At night, beside his solitary campfire, he would catch himself listening for the sound of her voice, only to be met with the hollow song of the wind. One evening, camped near a small trading post, Garrett found himself doing something he hadn't done since childhood, looking up at the stars and wondering if there might be something more than empty sky above. "If you're there," he whispered, feeling foolish but compelled nonetheless, "give me a sign, something, anything." No divine light appeared, no voice spoke from the heavens. But as he dozed off, Garrett dreamed of Katherine not as he had left her, but standing in a small shop, surrounded by bottles and herbs, looking out a window as if waiting for someone. The dream stayed with him through the morning, so vivid it felt more like a memory than a fantasy. As he saddled Diablo, a decision crystallized in his mind, clear and certain in a way few things had been since the war. "What do you say, boy?" he asked the stallion, who tossed his head as if in agreement. "Think it's time we visited Tucson." The journey took 4 days, Garrett pushing harder than he normally would, driven by a sense of urgency he couldn't explain. Tucson appeared on the horizon like a mirage, dusty, sprawling, alive with the bustle of a growing frontier town. Garrett had avoided settlements larger than trading posts for years, and the press of humanity made his skin crawl as he rode down the main street. Eyes followed him, a stranger on a magnificent black stallion, trail-worn but carrying himself with the alertness of a former soldier. He had no idea how to find Katherine in this maze of buildings, but logic suggested an apothecary would be near the center of town. Asking directions at the livery where he stabled Diablo, Garrett learned there was indeed such a shop on Pennington Street, run by a widow named Edwards. Heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with danger, Garrett made his way to the address. The shop was small but neat, with dried herbs hanging in the window and a sign that read "Edwards Apothecary and Remedies" in careful lettering. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door, a small bell announcing his entrance. The interior was cool and fragrant with herbs, shelves lined with bottles and tins. A counter ran along one wall, and behind it stood an older woman with graying hair who looked up as he entered. "Good afternoon, sir. How may I help you?" Her eyes were kind but tired, with shadows beneath them that spoke of recent worry. "I'm looking for Katherine Edwards," Garrett said, removing his hat. Is she here?" The woman's expression changed, becoming more guarded. "May I ask who's inquiring? My name is Garrett Voss. She helped me with my horse a while back. I wanted to thank her properly." Recognition dawned in the woman's eyes. "You're the cowboy with the injured stallion." It wasn't a question. "Katherine has spoken of you." Before Garrett could respond, a door at the back of the shop opened and Katherine appeared, carrying a tray of freshly prepared medicines. She froze when she saw him, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Garrett, hello, Katherine." She set the tray down carefully, as if afraid her trembling hands might drop it. "What are you doing here?" "Diablo wanted to thank you properly for saving his life," Garrett said, a small smile playing at his lips. "And so did I." Katherine's aunt looked between them, understanding in her expression. "I believe I should check on Sarah and the baby," she said tactfully, moving toward the back room. "Katherine, perhaps you could help this gentleman find whatever he needs." When they were alone, Katherine moved from behind the counter, stopping an arm's length from Garrett. "How is Diablo?" "Fully recovered, strong as ever." Garrett took a step closer. "Your instructions were perfect. I'm glad." She searched his face. "That's a long journey just to say thank you." "It is," he agreed, "but I had another reason for coming." "And what might that be?" Garrett took a deep breath. "The night you prayed over my horse, I didn't believe it would make any difference, but it did, not just for Diablo but for me." Katherine's expression softened. "How so?" "You showed me that faith isn't about expecting miracles. It's about having the courage to care, to try, even when the odds are against you." He reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. "After you left, I found myself looking at the stars one night, asking for a sign. I dreamed of you standing in this very shop, looking out the window." Katherine's eyes widened. "Yesterday afternoon, I was doing exactly that, thinking of you, wondering where you were." Garrett's heart quickened. "I don't know if that was God or fate or just my own stubborn heart refusing to let go, but I know I had to find you again." "Why?" she asked softly, though the hope in her eyes suggested she already knew the answer. "Because you made me believe again, not just in God, but in humanity. In connection." He tightened his grip on her hand. "In love." Katherine's free hand came up to touch his cheek, her fingers gentle against his weather-worn skin. "I prayed you would find peace, Garrett. I never dared pray you would find your way back to me." "Then we're both surprised," he murmured, leaning forward to press his forehead against hers. "I don't know what happens next. I'm not a city man and I can't pretend to be, but I know I want you in my life, however that might work." Katherine smiled, a radiant expression that lit her entire face. "My aunt needs help here only until Sarah is well enough to return to work. After that, I've always wondered what it might be like to be a healer on the frontier where help is most needed." Hope bloomed in Garrett's chest. "It's a hard life, but not a lonely one if we face it together." Her eyes held his, steady and sure. "I believe some things are meant to be, Garrett Voss, even if the path to finding them isn't always straight." In answer, Garrett closed the distance between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Outside the shop window, Tucson continued its bustling pace, unaware that within its walls, two souls had found their miracle not in grand gestures or divine intervention, but in the simple, profound connection between two hearts that had found faith in each other. And somewhere in the livery stable across town, a black stallion named Diablo rested peacefully. His role in bringing together a skeptical cowboy and a faithful healer complete proof that sometimes prayers are answered in the most unexpected ways.